The first battle we lose when we get emotionally rattled isn't with the world around us. It's the one happening silently in our heads. Before a word is spoken, before a gesture is made, before the outside world even has a chance to reach us, our internal dialogue has already decided whether we'll stay calm or give our peace away. That's where the real work begins. Training your mind to stay unbothered doesn't start with controlling other people's actions. It starts with mastering what you say to yourself about them. Most people live on autopilot. They've trained themselves to respond based on past experiences, old patterns, or unprocessed pain. Someone cuts them off in traffic, instant anger. A coworker criticizes them, immediate defensiveness. A family member dismisses their feelings, deep emotional spiral. Why? Because we've handed the controls of our inner world to external forces. And when your inner dialogue is reactive, your outer behavior will always follow. The truth is, your first response is more important than your final reaction, because your first response, that quiet, initial thought, is where your power either grows or gets hijacked. If your first thought is, they're always trying to bring me down, or I can't believe they said that to me, you've already lost your center. But if that first thought becomes, this isn't about me, or they're projecting something they haven't healed, then you're no longer reacting, you're leading. You're thinking like someone who owns their space. Psychologically, this comes down to metacognition, your ability to observe your own thoughts instead of becoming them. And philosophically, it's about sovereignty. The idea that no one, and I mean no one, should be able to trespass into your mental territory without permission. Think of your mind like a house. Not every knock on the door deserves an open invitation. Just because someone brings negativity to your doorstep doesn't mean you have to let it live in your living room. Here's the catch, though. Most of us were never taught this. We were conditioned to believe that reacting quickly means strength, that standing up for yourself means always clapping back, and that silence means weakness. But real power isn't loud. It doesn't scramble to prove anything. Power knows it doesn't have to attend every argument it's invited to. And more than anything, it knows how to redirect the conversation happening inside before it ever leaks outside. So how do you train that voice in your head? It starts with awareness. The next time you feel triggered, pause. Just long enough to ask yourself, what am I telling myself right now? And don't just settle for the surface level answer. Dig. Are you interpreting the moment as rejection, disrespect, humiliation? Is that interpretation true, or is it your ego's defense mechanism? Then, reframe. If your thought is, they disrespected me, can you shift it to, they're acting from their own dysfunction, not a truth about me? That's not weakness, that's wisdom. That's you stepping back far enough to see the full picture instead of zooming in on one smudged corner. That's you stepping back far enough to see the full picture instead of zooming in on one smudged corner. It's also helpful to create a kind of mental mantra, something simple, grounded, and personal that you return to in the heat of the moment. It might be, this isn't mine to carry, or I protect my peace first. That mantra becomes the anchor that grounds your mind when emotion tries to sweep it away. Over time, this becomes a discipline. The same way athletes train their muscles, you train your inner voice. Every moment of irritation becomes a chance to choose intention over instinct. And the more you choose wisely, the more that wise voice becomes your new default. Eventually, you reach a point where people notice something different about you. You're not easily provoked. You're not defensive. You respond, but you don't over-explain. You listen, but you don't absorb. You hold space, but you don't lose yourself in it. That's what it means to train your mind to stay unbothered. Not by numbing your emotions, but by leading them. Not by avoiding people, but by protecting your energy. And not by controlling the world, but by commanding your own. Because at the end of the day, no one else is responsible for your peace. Not your partner, not your boss, not that random person online. It's on you. Your first thought determines your first step. So train it, sharpen it, lead it, and you'll start to realize when your inner voice is aligned, the outside world can't shake you. If we're serious about training the mind to stay unbothered, we have to talk about detachment. And I don't mean cold indifference. I mean the kind of intentional, grounded detachment that keeps you centered when everything around you is trying to pull you off course. You don't get rattled by every comment, every attitude, every moment that doesn't go your way, because you've created internal distance between yourself and the chaos. You know who you are, and you know what deserves your attention. That's the issue, really. Most of us give too much mental real estate to things and people that haven't earned it. And what that does over time is deplete your emotional energy. You're running mental simulations of conversations that already happened. You're replaying moments, defending yourself in your own mind. You're letting someone's 2-second remark dictate the next 2 hours of your mood. And that's not peace. That's a prison. You're handing your emotional state over to people who probably aren't even thinking about you anymore. When you detach, you're not becoming passive. You're becoming selective. You're choosing where your energy goes, what thoughts are worth engaging, and what behaviors require a response. And that's the real power. Choice. Staying unbothered doesn't mean you never feel anything. It means you've trained yourself to recognize which emotions are visitors and which are permanent residents. You feel them, but they don't steer the wheel. You acknowledge the noise, but you don't turn up the volume. This is where the psychological side kicks in. We are biologically wired to react. Fight, flight, freeze, that's in our nervous system. But we're also equipped with something no other creature on this planet has. Self-awareness, the ability to notice what we feel without acting on it. That gap between emotion and response is everything. It's the space where growth happens. It's the space where maturity is built. And philosophically, this comes down to ego, the part of us that wants to be right, to be respected, to be validated, to be seen. And when that ego feels threatened by criticism, by disrespect, by being ignored, it demands a reaction. But here's the truth. Not every ego bruise is worth bandaging. Some wounds are meant to be left alone because the pain isn't a reflection of who you are. It's a reflection of what you're still attached to. One of the greatest shifts you can make is understanding that you don't owe anyone a reaction. Just because someone tries to trigger you doesn't mean you have to play along. Silence is not weakness. Disengagement is not surrender. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stay still in a moment that wants to make you spiral. You don't need to argue. You don't need to prove. You just need to protect what you've built inside. And look, people will project. They'll throw their insecurities at you. They'll speak from their own unhealed pain. They'll criticize you because they don't have the courage to confront themselves. But when you've trained your mind to be unbothered, you see that clearly. You no longer personalize every jab or every mood shift around you. You understand this isn't about you, it's about them. And when you know that, you stop internalizing what was never yours to carry. That's why detachment is powerful. It's not an escape, it's clarity. It's stepping back just far enough to see the full picture, and then deciding what part of it actually deserves your engagement. You're no longer reacting from emotion, you're responding from awareness. That's the difference between someone who's controlled by life and someone who's leading it. And yes, this takes practice. You don't build this overnight. But each moment where you choose not to be pulled into pettiness, each time you recognize a trigger but don't react to it, you're laying down the neural wiring for emotional resilience. You're training your mind to respond, not react, to observe, not absorb. And people will notice. You'll start hearing things like, "You've changed," or you don't let things get to you anymore. And they're right. You have changed, not because you care less, but because you've learned to care better. You've stopped handing out pieces of yourself to every situation that demands attention. You've become intentional, and that's the real growth. One of the most overlooked foundations of staying unbothered is the ability to set boundaries, not as an act of defense, but as a form of discipline. And let's be clear, boundaries are not about shutting people out. They're about deciding what and who gets to come in. It's not about walls, it's about filters. Boundaries are how we protect the space we've worked so hard to cultivate internally. Without them, even the strongest mindset will get worn down by the weight of other people's expectations, demands, and emotions. The problem is, many of us have been conditioned to feel guilt around boundaries. We were raised to believe that being nice means being available, that love equals self-sacrifice, and that saying no is somehow rude or unkind. But let me ask you something. How kind is it to betray your own peace to keep someone else comfortable? So what's to say you won't get guilty? How kind is it to abandon yourself for approval you never really asked for? There's nothing noble about constantly overextending yourself. There's nothing honorable about letting people disrespect your time, your values, or your emotional bandwidth just because you're afraid of how they'll react. When you live like that, you're not being selfless, you're being silently resentful. And resentment, whether we admit it or not, always leaks out. It shows up in how we speak, how we distance ourselves, how we carry tension in our bodies. We think we're avoiding conflict, but we're just transferring it inward. That's why boundaries aren't just a relational tool, they're a psychological necessity. They are the lines that protect your inner calm from being disrupted by someone else's chaos. And philosophically, they come down to self-respect, not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet, consistent kind that says, I will not abandon myself to keep you comfortable. But here's the deeper part. Boundaries aren't always verbal. In fact, the most powerful boundaries are often silent. They're the choices you make about what you give your energy to, who you allow in your proximity, and how much access people have to your emotions. You don't have to announce them. You just have to know. You live them, you model them, you reinforce them through behavior, not just words. Someone talks to you in a tone that doesn't sit right, you don't have to match their energy, you shift yours. You don't engage, you keep your tone grounded. That's a boundary. Someone keeps pulling you into drama, trying to get a reaction, you don't have to defend yourself every time. You can leave their comment where it belongs, with them. That's a boundary. And yes, there will be people who don't like it. Some will say you've changed. Some will call you cold. Others might even call you selfish. But let me tell you, when someone benefits from your lack of boundaries, your growth will feel like a threat. And that's okay. You're not responsible for their discomfort. You're responsible for your alignment. There's this fear that if we say no, we'll be seen as difficult. But the truth is, a clear no is far more respectful to you and to them than a hesitant yes that you resent later. We can't keep confusing people-pleasing with kindness. They're not the same. One comes from fear, the other comes from love, and love, real love, always includes clarity. Psychologically, the most self-awareness people are the ones who understand their limits. They don't try to be everything to everyone. They do their best to meet everyone. They know when to lean in and when to step back. And more importantly, they know that they are not the emotional storage space for other people's stress. You can care without caring. You can support without sacrificing. You can love without losing yourself. When you get this right, something incredible happens. You stop explaining yourself. You stop over-justifying your choices. You stop seeking approval for things that don't require permission. You stop overthinking. You stop seeking approval for things that don't require permission. You just live calmly, clearly, and consistently. And that kind of energy, it radiates. People begin to respond to your calm because they can sense your clarity. They know they can't pull you off center because you're not operating from a place of proving. You're operating from a place of peace. You didn't train your mind to stay unbothered, just to let unfiltered access drain it. You did it to live with intention. Boundaries make that possible. When you stop overextending yourself to be understood, you start honoring yourself to be at peace. Here's the part no one wants to hear. Mental calm doesn't show up because you wish for it. It doesn't arrive just because you've read something inspirational or listened to a powerful speech. It shows up when you train for it, daily, intentionally, repeatedly. That's the truth. The ability to stay unbothered isn't a mindset you turn on like a light switch. It's a muscle. And if you're not giving it reps, you're not building it. Most people wait for life to settle down before they find peace. But peace isn't found in calm conditions. It's built during chaos. And that means you don't just train when it's easy. You train especially when it's inconvenient. When someone says something that pushes your buttons and plans fall apart. When you're tired, impatient, under pressure. Those are the training grounds. Those are the reps that strengthen your emotional control. Think about it this way. No athlete gets strong by avoiding stress. They get strong by pushing against resistance over and over again until their body adapts. The same principle applies to your mind. You build calm by confronting discomfort without letting it hijack your response. That's how you rewire your patterns. That's how you reshape your default reaction. But let's go deeper. Psychologically, your brain is constantly trying to conserve energy. It loves habits, even the unhealthy ones, because they're efficient. So if you've spent years reacting quickly, arguing often, or overthinking situations, your brain has turned that into a default pathway. Training your mind means interrupting that pattern and saying, no, we're doing this differently now, and then doing it again and again until the new pathway becomes stronger than the old one. And here's where it gets philosophical. This kind of training is a commitment to sovereignty, to becoming the kind of person who doesn't just survive situations, but leads through them. Someone who doesn't shrink in the face of pressure or let their mood be controlled by other people's energy. Because at some point, you realize that emotional regulation isn't just about you, it's about the people around you too. Your presence affects every room you walk into. When you stay grounded, you give others permission to breathe deeper, you set a tone. But none of that happens unless you show up consistently. And I mean every day, not just in big, dramatic moments, but in small, forgettable ones. When someone cuts you off in traffic, when your Wi-Fi drops during an important call, or someone sends a passive-aggressive text, all those tiny moments are opportunities to choose calm over chaos. They may feel insignificant, but they're not. They're mental reps. They're training your emotional response for the moments that do matter. The conversations, the relationships, the decisions that define your peace. And make no mistake, this isn't about suppression. Staying unbothered doesn't mean pretending nothing affects you. It means acknowledging what affects you and then choosing how you want to respond. It's not reactive, it's reflective. You pause, you breathe, you decide. That's power. That's leadership. Over yourself first, then everything else. The best part is, once you've trained this long enough, you start to feel it shift. People who used to trigger you don't hold the same power anymore. Situations that once made your blood boil now get a calm head nod. You're no longer trying to prove, defend, or explain. You simply are. And that kind of inner stillness, that's the reward of the work. It's not that life got easier, it's that you got stronger. And I'll be honest, it's not always fun. Sometimes you'll want to react. Sometimes you'll feel like blowing up, snapping back, shutting down. But that's when you lean on the reps. You remember that you've trained for this. You've rehearsed